Welcome, class. We're still on neurology. We're looking at a section that's referred to as the diencephalon. In the word, you can see encephalon, or you can even see the word cephal, like cephalad, which means the head. Some people develop encephalitis, which is swelling of the brain. When you see the word diencephalon, it means the center or through the center of the brain. So the diencephalon is composed of these terms, thalamus, hypothalamus, and epithalamus. They all have the word thalamus in it. Thalamus, hypothalamus, and epithalamus. So when we look at this sagittal view, we see the diencephalon is here. The thalamus is this large pit that we see here, that brownish color. And then below it, because after all, hypo means under or less than. So the hypothalamus is under this section right here. So you have the thalamus, you have the hypothalamus here. Okay. And then the epithalamus is this region right here, which is made up of by part of this pineal gland, not to be confused with the one in the front that's called the pituitary gland. Okay, but what's true about the pituitary and the pineal gland is they do make hormones. They are part of the brain, but they're also part of the endocrine system. The pineal gland is responsible for making melatonin, which helps tone you down at night and help you sleep. The pituitary, you will learn in endocrinology that it has two divisions. It has an anterior division and a posterior division. So they'll call it the anterior pituitary and posterior pituitary. The anterior pituitary is also known as the adenohypophysis. Adenohypophysis, and the posterior is referred to as the neurohypophysis. So there's an adenohypophysis and a neurohypophysis. The adenohypophysis is the anterior pituitary. The neurohypophysis is the posterior pituitary. Don't confuse that with pineal. The pituitary is anterior. The pineal gland is more posterior. The thalamus, when we think of the thalamus, I want you to think of it as the relay station. It is a relay station for all the sensory impulses that are ascending, that are going up your spinal cord, because sensory impulses have to go up ascending or afferent tracks, which all go from the spinal cord up to the brain. So we know that when we look at the cerebrum, we know that there's a pre-central gyrus, and we know that there's a post-central gyrus. And the post-central gyrus is where all the sensory information ends up in the brain. But before it ends up in the post-central gyrus, it is relayed here to the thalamus. So the thalamus is considered the relay station. And you look, oh my goodness, there are so many different nuclei. There are so many different nuclei of the thalamus. If this was a more advanced neurology class, you would have to have all of these different nuclei and sections memorized. But for our purposes, as an intro course to A&P, I'm happy that you know that the thalamus is the primary relay station for all the sensory impulses except for the sense of smell. Smell does not synapse or get relayed to the thalamus. From this view, you can see the two hemispheres of the cerebrum. We can see here's the cerebrum. This is referred to as the corpus callosum, which is all the corpus callosum is made up of white matter and these tracts that connect the left brain to the right brain. And women happen to have a much stronger, women are biologically wired to have a much stronger connection anatomically from the left brain to the right brain, a much thicker and better corpus callosum than men have. Then right here, we could see the lateral ventricles. Remember, there are four ventricles. Lateral ventricle refers to ventricles 1 and ventricle 2. And then right down here, this is your third ventricle. So the CSF is flowing right down the center. The fourth ventricle you can't see. Remember, it's just adjacent to the cerebellum. In any manner, right here, what's circled is kidney bean shape. That's your thalamus. That's the thalamus. That's where all of your sensory information is going to be relayed, except for the sense of smell. Below the thalamus, there's your hypothalamus. Hypothalamus is an extremely important part of the brain. It doesn't deal with sensory information like the thalamus does. It's actually the control center to the autonomic neural system. When we think of the autonomic neural system, we know that it has two divisions, your sympathetics and your parasympathetics. So the hypothalamus oversees and controls the sympathetics and parasympathetics as one of the main functions. It also deals with your satiety center, with your hunger, with your thirst, with fever, with your sex drive, anger, all controlled by the hypothalamus. So here we can see that the hypothalamus is found inferior to the thalamus, and that would make sense. Just look at the name, hypo, under the thalamus. And it too has many regions like the thalamus, not as many, it only has 4 regions, but it is one of the major regulators of homeostasis in the body, primarily because of the sympathetics and parasympathetics, but also the hypothalamus is also a major regulator because it's going to send hormones to the pituitary gland. So the hypothalamus has connections to both the anterior and the posterior pituitary. So the hypothalamus can send a signal to the pituitary, and maybe one of the hormones so let's say this is the hypothalamus in the brain, and then let's say here's the thyroid gland in the throat, like this. Looks like a letter H. And then let's put the pituitary gland right here. So the hypothalamus will send some sort of message to the pituitary, and maybe it's going to release thyroid releasing hormone. So the hypothalamus will send thyroid releasing hormone to the pituitary, and then your pituitary is going to send a chemical message to the thalamus, and that may be thyroid stimulating hormone. So the hypothalamus sends a chemical messenger called thyroid releasing hormone to the pituitary. The anterior pituitary receives that, and the pituitary releases a chemical or a hormone called thyroid stimulating hormones, goes to the thyroid, and then your thyroid is going to release a hormone like T4, thyroxine, and T4 can be converted to T3. These are your thyroid hormones, and they regulate your metabolism. So, metabolism is really important for homeostasis, right? That's just one example. There are many, but when you get to AMP2, within the first week or two, you will go over the endocrine system and you will remember at least some of this foundational work that we discussed here is that there is a intimate connection between the hypothalamus, the pituitary, and the thyroid. And there's another intimate connection between the hypothalamus, the pituitary, and your adrenal glands. And there's another intimate connection between the hypothalamus, the pituitary, and the gonads, whether they're the testes or the ovaries. Again, always dealing with homeostasis, a dynamic state of balance and equilibrium. So it is a major regulator of homeostasis. It receives somatic and visceral input regarding taste, smell, hearing. It monitors osmotic pressure. It's dealing with the temperature of the blood. It manages and monitors your fever. It controls and integrates the autonomic neural system, which regulates your smooth muscle, your cardiac muscle, all your glands. It synthesizes regulatory hormones that control the anterior pituitary. And the hypothalamus has axons that extend directly into the posterior pituitary, where they secrete hormones as well. The hypothalamus regulates rage, your aggression. It's involved with pain, pleasure, arousal, when you're hungry, when you're thirsty, body temperature, sleep. Hypothalamus is a very, very important region. It's also involved in a lot of eating disorders. When there's damage to the hypothalamus, this is when you see documentaries of like the 1,000 pound woman or the 1,000 pound man. These are people who imagine being very hungry, right? If you're very hungry and you're starving, you may order a little bit more food, right, than you could handle at a restaurant. So like you may be eating food and you just get stuffed. You're like, oh, I can't eat anymore, right? Because the signal goes to your hypothalamus and says, okay, I'm not thirsty anymore and I'm not hungry, I'm full. But imagine never getting that signal that you're full. So you're always getting those hunger pangs. You just keep eating and eating and eating and eating, hoping that it gets stimulated. Right? So that the message is, I'm full. Okay. The epithalamus, this primarily involves the pineal gland. And the pineal gland, this is all back here in this section. The pituitary is up here in the front. The pineal gland is an endocrine gland. It's very small, about the size of a pea, and it's involved in secreting melatonin, and it does it when it's dark out. So it helps to promote sleepiness. It's involved in setting that biological clock. Melatonin also has some positive influence on the gut. It is known to be influential and to help people with irritable bowel disease. It has some beneficial impact. Melatonin has also been used. There's lots of research, especially with melatonin and COVID as well. Some positive, influential literature on that. Within the epithalamus, there's a nuclei there called a habenular nuclei. And this is what gives people more of like an emotional response to odors, like, oh, grandma's cooking, that smells so good. Or, oh, that perfume or cologne smells really, really nice. There's like an emotional response. Or, whoa, who just went in the bathroom, right? Get out of there. That sort of thing, an emotional response to odors. Okay, when we come back, we'll get into the cerebrum.